All right, welcome to Cyber Talk with Bob and Chris. Bob, let me do the intro this week because technically it's all about me, I guess, but that's not really what it's supposed to be about. Today, what we want to talk about is wireless security cameras, and the reason for that is because last week I was actually interviewed on a local TV network here for ABC, and it actually aired this week on Tuesday, and we got some pretty good feedback. We also had an interesting phone call. I'll probably tell the story at the end, so stay tuned for that. But the premise is in downtown Detroit, a car was stolen, and there were minutes to hours of security camera footage just missing. There were just these huge gaps in cameras, and it was all in this one area. And what happened is they were all wireless cameras. So one of the things we want to talk about is why wireless security cameras are more of a convenience than a security feature.
So, Chris, when you said that the wireless cameras were off, and you're talking about stuff through the street that other people had.
Yeah, like so the entire like it wasn't the entire block, but it was around a certain region. All of the cameras had gaps in their recording.
Oh, cool.
So they're mostly all Ring cameras. No, I'm not. This is not an anti-Ring thing. This is just wireless cameras in general thing. There's two main attacks that you can use to basically take wireless cameras offline, and one would be to deauth it. And deauthing is something that's done to any wireless device. So it could be your cell phone, it could be your computer, could be a camera, it could be lights. And what you do is you can use some software, or you can use a little watch that you can buy at Amazon or pick a vendor. And within like 10 to 15 feet, you can deauth it. And what that does is it finds the address of the device, and it just sends the access point that it wants to deauthenticate from the access point. So the way that Ring works and a lot of wireless cameras work is they don't record on the camera. They record at a central base station, or they record directly to the internet. Well,
Right.
if you kill the internet on the camera, guess what it can't do? It can't
Can't
record,
record.
right?
So deauthing is actually that's disconnecting them from the Wi-Fi.
Exactly. And you can do that pretty large scale. It depends on how sophisticated you are, what software you use, like how big your antenna is. The easier way to do it though is wireless jamming, which is highly illegal. You're not supposed to have a wireless jammer. You're not supposed to use a wireless jammer. Pretty sure you're not supposed to manufacture them in the United States, but people do. And this is what they think happened down there, where they actually jammed all of the wireless signal in the entire area. Now, jamming is kind of a weird term because it's not really jamming. What they're doing is they're just flooding the same frequencies out, and it's just overwhelming the systems, and then it
Right.
takes down the Wi-Fi. So it's not really jamming per se, like what people would think. It's not blocking a signal; it's just overwhelming it.
So,
And
so basically, if they had a wireless jammer
yep,
of flooding the signal, and they carried it with them, they'd basically be creating a Wi-Fi bubble around them.
yeah. And so when I talked to them on the news, we kind of went through that. They covered both the DR thing because I showed them like a $50 device. Actually, it's $10 if you buy it straight from China, but it's $50 if you buy it on Amazon. Markup.
There you go.
Wireless jammers, I found a few, and some of them it's not just wireless. You can block cell signals with it. You can block GPS. So if you really want to just totally pick a frequency band and just totally nuke it, you can absolutely do it. They're not that expensive. The one that I showed them had 28 antennas on it. Now picture this: 28 antennas. It could do. I think it could do almost 200-foot radius around this device and pretty much just blast out wireless around it. Now they could have spent a little more. They could have amped up power. They could have did a wider range, but they did it enough that all of the cameras around this house and everything. And I think they left it on. They drove down the street, so they weren't getting caught, not from cameras anyway. So the way that you fight this, and this is kind of like where we went back to, I'm like, you need a wired camera. If you're relying on wireless cameras, it's convenience over security, because it's super easy to jam signals. It's super easy to deauth things. It's not that difficult. You should have at least one wired camera for security or whatever you're trying to protect. If
Sure.
it's your business, maybe have multiple wired cameras, but wireless cameras have become so easy to put up, and because people don't want to run wires, they don't want to deal with that. However, wireless jamming doesn't work against a wired camera. Now, the other option that you could do is if you can find a camera that can record locally on the camera, not send it back to a base station, but literally the camera record, then that'd be another way to think about it. But
Yeah, we've got.
Ring doesn't do that. And for this news piece, it was all about Ring. because Ring only has two ways of recording: directly to the internet or to the base station. The problem with the base station is it records wireless signals. So if you nuke it on a camera, it doesn't record anything. So
Wow.
yeah,
Actually, I when you were talking about wireless cameras, I thought you were going to talk about it a little differently. Where a while ago, I had somebody go buy a bunch of wireless cameras. They put them into their office, and they all interfered with the Wi-Fi and killed the Wi-Fi. That was
did they talk?
pre-Wi-Fi.
Did they feed information back to China too?
Nah, they might have, but this was years ago. But it was like, okay,
Oh,
we got these new wireless cameras. They were, it was
yeah.
before all the standards were out, and it literally took down all the office Wi-Fi.
Oops.
It used to be the microwave oven would affect the Wi-Fi. Now it's
Well, too, it depends on what feed you're doing. If you're watching the feed, it can take down Wi-Fi real easy because like they can pump so much bandwidth out of those cameras that
yep.
your wireless might not be able to handle it.
So the moral of your story is get wired cameras where you can, have at least
Yep.
one,
Yeah.
and record locally. Sounds like a good tip to me.
Yeah, I mean, you could do both. You definitely probably if you can get a wired camera that can record locally and stream to the internet. So if just in case you lose the internet, it still records. That's better. But yeah, it was a wild story because if you look in the news, if you start searching for this, you'll see it all over the country in small spurts. You'll see different spots that had the same problem. Is it widespread? No. Is it getting easier to do? Absolutely. So there's other wireless things you could try to do, but for jamming, there's nothing you cannot stop a jam. If somebody buys a jammer or has multiple jammers, there's ones that you can fit in a backpack. You could turn it on, fit in a backpack, and walk up, and like you'd be basically invisible to anything wireless. So yeah, and then we got a phone call out of this, so let's go over this. Person called, and we called them back because we're like, okay, they called really late, so our answering service gave us the phone message and said, and the person was like, call me back the next day after 1:00. So really cool. We call back. Yeah. Turns out if you're on TV and they see you on TV, they assume that you can do other things like find people and things like that. And it turns out that sometimes media coverage isn't good. This person needs help, and we followed through on some stuff like that to try to get them help. But it was a wild call. It was like 30 minutes. I felt bad for the person that works for me that was dealing with it. We were trying to get through that. We got through it, but yeah. So you get some weird stuff when you get on TV and they put your name out there. But luckily I have a wired camera here, so
you got a wired camera. Well, that's a good thing. And like, what's the takeaway for people? Besides getting a wired camera?
Well, this was residential, but it really equates to business. We're seeing more and more people put wireless cameras into business.
Yep.
And if it's for convenience to see, like if people are doing work, things like that. Now, if it's for compliance, I wouldn't do it. I would do wired cameras. So let's say it's for OSHA, or it's to make sure that people are safe, or if you're actually trying to stop, like watch to make sure people aren't stealing stuff. Definitely go with wired cameras. It's going to they're going to work a little bit better. They're going to keep you safe. Obviously, local recording is great, but you should have some offload too. So just in case somebody does get to where your camera NVR, like no video recorder basically is, you need to take it off site, because if you don't, they get to it and they wipe it, then you lose that footage as well. So
it's so easy to go to any of the big box stores and pick up some of these wireless cameras. You don't really know where the data is being sent to, but in New Jersey, it's actually cameras. Office cameras fall under a security and alarm license, and the IT guys are not the ones that are supposed to be touching that stuff. You really need to go to a licensed alarm and security company to get those systems together. Yeah, we work with those companies, but as far as provisioning and putting them in, that's not something that we can actually do in New Jersey.
So that's wild to me, because you can't pump your own gas either. So, well, fun in Jersey. Well, for here, anybody can really put up cameras here. There's nothing stopping them. We know some cabling companies that do security cameras. I don't dislike what they're doing in New Jersey, though. I think there should be some level of, I don't how do I say this? Some level of competency to put up cameras correctly and install systems. Because really, if it's for security, if it's really for like protecting people and stuff like that. Really, you want somebody doing this that does it all the time, that does it right, that's been trained and things like that. Like, you don't want some person off the street that you found on Craigslist to do it.
I agree with that, but I've also seen and worked with some of these guys in the past, and when the owner of the company or one of the techs pulls out his cell phone and starts floating between all the different client cameras that he's got, I've got a problem with that.
That's a whole other video. That's there's a lot to unpack with that one.
Absolutely. So
privacy concerns coming next.
There you go.
Oh man, yeah. That's the other thing with privacy, right? Like, anything accessible to the internet can be hacked. So be careful with things that are internet accessible. They should follow certain security protocols. Hopefully, multi-factor authentication is something that you're doing. If you're not, you don't want people watching cameras in your building. That's creepy.
So join us next week for cyber tips and cyber privacy issues to protect yourself.
Actually, we can talk next week about privacy. There's a law. We'll get a little filler. There's a law that's trying to get passed in Congress to set national federal privacy laws to kind of, because right now states are setting them. So it's creating kind of a storm that needs to be taken care of a little bit. We need to have a federal guideline for that, and then let states tweak it to a point. So
sounds good. Comment below if you've got something you'd like to talk about. If you want to reach out to Chris and find out more about him being a media star, certainly reach out to him.
You can ask me about it. If you're given the opportunity, do it. Just, that's all I gotta say about that. So it's cool.
And one side note, I was actually at an industry event this week, and one of the vendors at the event pulled me aside and said they've been watching our weekly talk and wanted to actually hop on with us or do a live event with me. So people are watching.
Yeah, they should hop on. A good conversation.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week.
See you.